Hi everyone, this is Boris for Sketchman Draws. Today I went to a used bookstore and I bought some comics. Um, so I wanted to talk. So I'm going to cover some comics in this channel too, because not from a standpoint or of course I might recommend comics too, but more of like a artistic point of view, which means like what the things that I found interesting artistically in terms of making comics, drawing comics, and so this one, of course, Patience, if you don't know, is by this cartoonist Daniel Clowes. He's a really famous cartoonist, and so as you can see, I'm not showing the whole book. I'm not going to talk about the story. Um, it's like a nice hardcover, and the papers are really great. It's like, of course, this is put out by Fantagraphics. The things that I wanted to sort of, just a note for myself, but also I wanted to share that, and because I just finished reading this, and it's really good story. I really loved it. It's a science fiction story. It's a love story. There's a thriller, a mystery, and there's a lot of things, and it's of course told in very Daniel Clowes fashion. So it's written and drawn by Daniel Clowes. Let's give some credits. Um, um, I guess he does everything, right? Like so because I don't see any letters. So I think he does everything. So coloring, writing, drawing, coloring, and lettering. So first of all, like I'm not going to show you the whole page because I think even if I tell you the story, reading the comic book, or in this case, like what we call graphic novel, I'm just going to call comic books. Reading the comic book with your hand or like on your screen, it's going to be a totally different experience. So here, for example, just the opening page, um, like telling the story with just the silhouettes. So I love when people when silhouettes are used, and even if here like it doesn't really make sense, but it's everything is there to serve the story, and we're not trying to capture reality. Of course, the iconic like Daniel Clowes draws these characters directly looking at the viewer, the reader. So so here these are actually this is our the title character, Patience. Um, so um, so as I go through this, some things that I noticed, like for example, the way. So I don't know, maybe it's just the way I see it, but the way Daniel Clowes draws his faces is like almost feels like he puts like a square and then he draws the eyes, nose, and mouth, and then he just puts everything else. I mean, I don't know. I've never seen him draw. I'm sure there are some videos, I hope. And then he always leaves the space for like a chin, right? And including for women, so I always get scared when I draw women because I've drawn so many men, like sometimes I make them too masculine, and part of it is like making this chin big. So I always try to make the chin really small. So now if you make the chin small, you have to. So again, yeah, you have to be really careful. So you have to have a really good foundation. So everybody has their own way of drawing a face. You need to find your own, and you can do that by looking at other artists. So, and comics is great because um, it gives you symbols like shortcuts to draw what you want. Um, at least good art cartoonists do. So another thing that I really, I'm sure many people have done this, but this is I don't know. This was interesting because usually when so I also I mean by the way I make comics too, um, comic strips and web comics. Um, so here, for example, okay, like the TV is running and he's talking over. So this is really great, like showing the overlap of the speech bubble. But and I think maybe I'll show you later on. There are moments where actually when someone interrupts someone, he also uses this, which is great, which makes sense. It's so simple. I know it's stupid, but Um, because what I would do is, let's say for example you have character A, character B, and character B is interrupting character A. And okay, let's say character A starts speaking, right? And then I'll stop the sentence where he's interrupted and put three dots, and then I'll make the character B talk with his own speech bubble. And actually, this is perfect because you can just write the whole. I mean, you can interrupt the other person like this with the overlapping the speech bubble. Um, so one of the things that I think, like a lot of artists, a lot of cartoonists, I sort of uh, like take time over is the background. Like for example, here, for example, the background. Um, when I read it, so first time I read it, I just read it. I don't pay attention really to the art. And then the second time I read it, I pay attention to the art. I take more time looking at the art and so on. Because the first time I read it, I just want to let the book guide me with the flow. And like here, like there are some just enough details to understand that he's standing on a street, and it's like all in one color. Of course, there's like a shadow here, but everything's in one color. Um, Same here. And I really love like monochromatic like coloring. Um, Again, I'm going along, but it's not going to spoil. Don't worry if you want to buy this. Like the monochromatic background are really interesting, and here this also really doesn't make sense if you really think about it. But it serves a story, like like it just pops. Of course, great lettering for the years. I love this. And yeah, this is also, for example, when I was speaking about the women with the big chins. Um, yeah, let me bring it a little bit lower. And then here, you see that? What else? So this is a science fiction story. So there is some time travel in it. Really great colors, like really simple. It's not too distracting. Helps you tell the story, and it keeps you engaged. I just read this in one. I think it's in one sitting. It's really great. Like sort of this color scheme sort of reminds me of like Super Mario with the sky and the clouds. Yeah. Yeah, those were the things that I sort of noticed. But the others, like it's really great storytelling, and especially again backgrounds. So, for example, here we can't really see what's going on back there, right? But here we see through the glass what's going on because it's important for the story. So yeah, so you don't have to show everything. You just have to show what's important for the story, what you're trying to say. Um, and in movies, I mean, in terms of camera, it does sort of what people, I mean, what comics is trying to do is sort of also go beyond what the camera or the eyes can see or what you can tell through the eyes. Because a lot of people compare movies, and I do too. I mean, in a way, I do compare to movies. But cameras like sort of focus on the characters, and the background is blurred. Um, well, that you can do that with comics. You can just put the way you can blur the background is like just putting a one color and just push it back uh, and just bring the characters forward with some bright colors. I was really glad to get this again. Um, I I buy I use comics because I'm not a collector. I'm not trying to collect. I'm just trying to learn from comics because as a cartoonist, and this is the first time I'm reading Daniel Clowes. I highly recommend it. Patience is really good. It's like a self-contained story, so there are no series or anything. And I think Clowes, if I understand correctly, he does this with other. Um, so speaking of comparison with movies, I mean, I was introduced to Daniel Clowes because his comic books from 8 Ball were adapted into Ghost World, if I'm not mistaken. So I need to look again. I am I'm just getting started in comics. In terms of discovering artists that I didn't know about before, because most of the artists that I am familiar with are from the big two, like Marvel and DC. So yeah, I think this is a and there's a really great vision when it comes to people who write and draw. And since I do that, I sort of recognize myself in them, identify myself in them. So yeah, I don't want to make a long video, but I just want to talk about those backgrounds, like the way he draws faces and the like speech bubbles. Those were the things that I think I remembered. So if this was helpful, I'll do more. I'll talk about because I bought more comics and I have more comics and manga. So I will talk about that. Let me know if you want me to talk about an other artist or other cartoonist that you like. And I was thinking about like taking different cartoonists and maybe analyzing their art style. Maybe that can also be helpful. And maybe trying to draw them and sort of like, see what they were trying to do. And I don't know, I think it's a really interesting thing to do. So thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. And please, of course, I think as you know, I always post on Monday tutorials. So subscribe to that so that you can be updated every time I upload that. I also have a meetup group, Bangkok Geeks. The link is always in the description of the videos. You can join my free online lessons for every Sunday, 2 p.m. Bangkok, Thailand time. I know it's maybe not very convenient for people who don't live in the Asian continent, but yeah, so I just wanted to say that. Thank you very much, and this is Boris for Sketchman Draws, signing off.